And here's some of the areas that they're still under revision from the Food and Drug Administration. If you're using water, where are you getting that water from? Is it coming from wells? Are you taking water out of a pond? Is the pond on your place sanitary? Well, probably not. Most of us all know, if you look out now, I look out on my pond, I've got 6 or 7 geese swimming around on it, and before the spring's over with, I'll have hundreds of them out there. Well, have they now just contaminated my pond water? Does that mean I can't use it on my fields? Does that mean I can't use it in my cattle, which are producing milk, or that I'm going to use later for beef? So what are those standards, and how do you test for that? We talked about compost. The Department of Agriculture has itself said we need more compost and organic matter put back into our fields to make our crops more nutritious. Yet, at the same time, the FDA says, well, that manure might be dangerous, and compost. So what will the new rules and regulations say about composting chicken guts if you're processing chickens on your own property? Can you compost those? Can you take and have a overhang for your cattle during winter and continue to throw in hay and straw and carbon matter, mix it with urine and manure till it gets about 2 to 3 feet deep, and then put it in your manure spreader and go out and spread it all over your fields? Is that going to get you sick, or is that something that needs to be regulated? Value added. Idaho is one of 12 states that does not have a cottage industry bill. It does have a Right to Farm Act, but it doesn't have a cottage industry bill. So if you're fixing something out of the house, or you have a small enterprise that makes something, or you even take the chicken that you have just processed and you cut it up into pieces and are now selling it as breasts and thighs and wings and that sort of thing, that's called value added. Do those have additional regulations and additional safety concerns? Obviously, the answer to that's probably yes. Does that mean now you're going to be regulated even more if you're trying to be value added? And lastly, they're still trying to figure out on the exemptions, which we're going to go to here shortly, who should be exempt under this Hester-Hager Amendment. If you're a small farm and you're only doing limited business and you reach a small number of consumers, is it really worth the Food and Drug Administration's time and effort and money to regulate you? So now I figure it's time to just lighten up a little bit, since I've been kind of throwing this at you a little fast and furious, and get a smile on your face. But we're not so sure that we want to do that too much, because we don't want to regulate the fact that if we start laughing and enjoying life, it too may not be regulated. Just kidding, folks. So, exemptions. What's it going to take to get exempt from this? One of them is if you're a small business. Let's define small. USDA says that you're a small farm, you've made under $250,000 in a year. The amendment that we were talking about in the previous slide says, hey, if you're a very small business and over the last 3 years you've only made less than $25,000, then maybe there's no reason for us to try to regulate you. Now I would have to present the question, does this mean you're still safe? If their premise is that they must have a Food Organization Act that looks at all aspects of food safety, does the size of your business really make a difference? Or is it the process of your enterprise in which you provide the consumer the bottom line? Virginia last year, as an example, passed a law called the Pickle Bill. And we've seen pickle bills in other states. Pickles are a time temperature product. And then the senator in that great state said, listen, just so you people will be happy, I'm going to allow you to sell $3,000 worth of pickles in a year. And Ag Business stood up and said, but there's problems with botulism and everything else, and you could get sick from that. And he said, well, after $3,000, then we'll really worry about it. We won't let them sell any more than $3,000. So the next question was, how are you going to know whether you got that $3,000 jar of pickles or you got the $3,001 jar of pickles? And are you really safe? The answer is obviously not. That seems like pretty faulty logic. But this is what they're looking at. They're also looking at the fact that over in 3 years, if you've sold less than $500,000, but you went straight to qualified end users. Now, who are end users? Well, you went straight from the farm to consumers, like under the USDA exemption for chickens, up to 20,000 birds. You can sell them right off your farm to the consumer. Okay, well, he's an end user, or she's an end user. Farmers markets are supposed to be end users. Every state has different rules for their farmers markets. Sometimes every state has different rules within even the health districts or the counties within the state. So you're going to have to look at farmers markets, and do they qualify as end users? According to this, they do. And restaurants. Well, as a general rule, they're saying restaurants, but in most places you have to get special licenses and follow state and health laws and various number of regulations and rules before you can sell the restaurants. Some states say you can go straight to restaurants under the exemption. So we're still out going to have to see where that comes from. And this, of course, the 275-mile radius, interstate or out, the USDA said is considered local. Now, many people will tell you that, is it really local? The city of Moscow, for instance, says local really is only 75 miles. If it came from outside of the 75-mile radius within the city, it's not considered local. So once again, you have authorities implementing their own rules and regulations, and this is kind of what you find with anything that gets implemented at a large level. As it comes down, people tend to add on, and more rules at the local level tend to augment those at the upper level. So what does this really mean? Well, what it means is that the Food and Drug Administration is going to step into every step of the food production chain. They see that as their charter now, and they may grant you an exemption, but nothing says they have to. And the cost and burden of running a brand new large agency like this is going to fall back on the small farmer and the small enterprise people who are producing food and going to cut in your profits. Case in point, here's some stories that have already made the news coming from the FSMA starting to come into full enactment. New Meadow Farms, New Morning Farms, been working for years. But guess what? He spread homemade fertilizers, compost. He had his animals walking through areas where he composted this and had his garden. And it might have gone into some of the creeks. And so they came through, and as he was standing there, and this is a story that comes right out of the news, the FDA inspector, which you saw in the one picture, with his blue hat and blue uniform, had his citation tab out, and he wrote him a series of no less than 17 citations. The man had been in business for years and has never had anybody get sick, and everybody was happy with his product. The second one here happened down in Akron, Ohio. Guy's been providing produce, family farm, for over 117 years. And now with all the rules and regulations he's having to follow, he said, I can't do it. It's too hard. I'm done. And 30 workers lost their job, and he quit. And it kind of makes you feel like maybe here in the future, as all this gets rolling and everybody gets done right in the rules and regulation, and it finally gets down to us, the producer, you're going to say, wow, is everything I want to do illegal? I mean, Joel Salatin wrote a book on that. Everything I want to do is illegal. And it kind of seems that way sometimes. And this little cartoon is kind of indicative of that. You may find yourself going, hey, come on over here. I can sell this to you. Nobody's looking. Or the only way you can sell your chicken is right off your farm. or everybody's going to have to get to know their farmer and come straight to the farm to get the products that you want, because once you cross out of your farm, it's no longer legal to take it anyplace else. So now I'm going to stop and take a look at some of the food codes. I see I'm running kind of short on time here, so I'll move through this. USDA we're going to look at poultry, because poultry is a good one. USDA exempts most producers for under 20,000 birds. You can do them right on your place. Some of the local public comes to your farm and picks them up. Back in 1980, Idaho, we're going to look at Idaho then Washington. Idaho got rid of all their meat inspectors. So you would think it would kick up to the higher level, USDA, but they said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to kick it down to the local health community. Washington State kind of looks at it two different ways. They say, well, we can give you two different types of permit, a special poultry permit or a food processor license to deal with the whole poultry issue. So let's quickly look through Idaho. Idaho's broken up into health districts. They have a custom code under their Idaho meat and poultry laws, and says that if you go take it to a custom plant, in other words, somebody who's just processing your meats and things for you, even if there's a USDA person there that looks at it and says, yeah, that looks good, sorry, that can't be sold to restaurants, markets, or any walk-in customers. It's only good for you, and when the animal or the bird shows up at these custom places, it can be alive, has to have a tag on it, whose name it is, and who it's going back to. Now, they also have a poultry exemption under the USDA that says, like I said, up to 20,000 birds. But Idaho says that's fine. USDA is exempting you from USDA inspection, but we're not. We're going to consider you a licensed food processing facility, and although you're exempt under the federal law, you're not exempt under Idaho law, which falls under the county or the district health agencies. So they're going to have to license you if you're not just doing it right on the farm and you want to sell at a farmer's market, or you want to sell to a restaurant, or you want to sell any place outside of just your farm or delivering just from your farm. You've got to get a license in Idaho as an Idaho poultry processing facility. You've got to have approved water supply. You've got to have the drainage. You've got to take it in just like you were a complete processing center. Ladies and gentlemen, this is up to the cost of somewhere probably over $50,000 just to get the facility to meet the code. You've got to have a three drain sink. You've got to have your floor drains. The floors have got to be sealed. You've got to have Mylar on the walls. You've got to have a processing equipment that's all been approved by somebody. You've got to have the building approved by somebody. And you've got to have, what are you doing with the waste? You've got to have the runoff water, according to the health district, has to go into a septic system, and you've got to get a special permit to compost the guts and leftovers, or you have to take it to an approved transfer site instead of composting it on your farm. All meats under Idaho fall under the Idaho code. Milk, although not considered food by the health department, or eggs, falls under the Idaho Department of Agriculture, and they hand out licenses for milk. Now, we'll talk about that very quickly. If you're doing raw milk, you can either get the herd share, which we talked about earlier, which is the contract between you and the customer, and that can be up to 3 cows, and they come to you, and you have to have a brucellosis test with your cow annually and a tuberculosis test with your cow. And then the customer takes the milk home, and that's between you and them based on contract. He owns or she owns part of that cow. So they have relieved the burden off the state or anybody else and made it a contract between producer and consumer directly. But if you want to sell to a restaurant or at the farmer's market or make cheese or do something else with that meat, then you have to get a small herd license, which is also up to 3 cows. But then Idaho at least provides an inspector who was at my house today and took the sample, and he'll come in every month, take a sample of your milk. He will test for pathogens, he'll test for E. coli, they'll test for somatic cells to make sure that that milk that you're putting out to the public is safe. Now, it takes 5 to 7 days to get the report back from the state, in which case you've already sold all the milk and the person's already drank it. But if somebody does get sick, at least you kind of know what happened.